Good evening and welcome to the Job Search Solution, the radio program where we talk about looking for a job, changing jobs, changing careers, hiring. And as always, we begin with a prayer. Dear God, grant us thy peace and thy mercy. Thy will be done. And in just a few minutes, Rich Levinski is going to be with us talking about consultants in the workplace. Meanwhile, we're going to finish up the myths. We've been talking over the last few weeks about all of the myths that go on in the job search. And I go on the internet from time to time and read information that people put on there as though it was gospel and written by authors and counselors and supposedly people that have helped people find a job, and some of it's junk. It's just absolutely junk. If it doesn't come from somebody that's in the trenches every single day, helping people find a job, don't pay any attention to it. I've said it before and I've said it again. It's like asking somebody that's married advice on marriage. Everybody thinks they've been married. They have advice on marriage. Well, maybe they do, maybe they don't. But just because you found a job before doesn't mean you're an authority on finding a job. Today's myth is I'm too shy to thrust myself at a prospective employer. Lots of people just don't like interviewing. They don't like getting in front of employers. They don't like having to get interviews. They don't like having to sell themselves. Their attitude is, if I'm good, everybody's going to know it. That's just not true. Everybody's not going to know it. Just because you happen to be good, if you don't explain it to a prospective employer and get used to explaining it to a prospective employer, you're going to lose. And the myth is that if I'm good, everybody's going to know I'm good, because word travels. Don't be so convinced of that. It doesn't necessarily travel. People don't know how good you are in an interviewing situation unless you explain to them, and you better know how good you are and why. It doesn't mean that you come across egotistically or just, hey, I'm good, no matter what anybody says, I am good. No, you have to prove to people that you're good. But if you don't tell them that you're good and explain to them how you're good and what you can do for them that nobody else can, nobody else is going to do it for you. And so you better get used to doing it. This just plain takes practice. No matter how introverted you are, no matter how difficult it is for you to get in front of people and sell yourself, you're going to have to learn to do it. It just takes practice. We explain this in detail in the job search solution, but you've got to learn to sell yourself and sell yourself really well. Another myth is that if you're good, you're always going to have a job. Well, that might have been true in the 60s, maybe in the 70s, but that's just not true. I talked to a fellow not too long ago who said that. He used to tell me that all the time. He was an employer of mine. If people are good, they're always going to have a job. I don't want to interview anybody that's unemployed. Just because if they're unemployed, they can't be very good. Until it happened to him. A company bought his company and he became unemployed. So he gives me a call and he explains to me that he's out of work and he needs a job. And all of a sudden it changed. So just because somebody's out of work and doesn't have a job doesn't mean they aren't good at what they do. They just happen to be at the wrong place at the wrong time, depending on the situation. As we've mentioned before, companies expand and contract more than they ever have. And sometimes you're the windshield, sometimes you're the bug. It's just the way it is. But don't get this idea that if you're a hiring authority or even a candidate, that just because you don't have a job makes you any less of a quality candidate. And another myth is people come in and say to me all the time, I just don't want a job like the last one. The last one was awful, and they were this and they were that, and they were bad, and it was ugly, and it was terrible, and they were just bad people. Employers identify with employers. Anything you say about your present employer or past employer, you're going to eventually say about them. Now, if you made a mistake in going to work for the wrong organization, and it was just an honest mistake that people make, that's one thing. And saying, I made a mistake. Heck, we all make 10 mistakes a day. Just, I made a mistake in going to work here. Looking back on it, if I knew then what I know now, I wouldn't have made that decision. Take responsibility for the mistake you might have made. But if you go around bad-mouthing the people that you worked for and keep saying things like, I don't want to make a mistake like I made the last time. I don't want a job like the last one. I don't like those people. They didn't like me and all of that. It's just going to be a bad situation. And it's going to come across very poorly. And the people that you are interviewing with are going to think that you've made nothing but bad decisions all along the way. I had an employer tell me one time, this guy makes such poor decisions on the companies that he goes to work for. I don't want to be a notch on his belt. So just forget it. He's got a black cloud over his head, and it's not something that I want to be a part of. So keep those myths in mind when you go to look for a job. All right, we're going to take a short break. Stay tuned. This is Tony Bashara with the Job Search Solution.